Hi guys, it's Kelly. I am back again with another video sponsored by Simon Says Stamp, and today I am going to be using a stamp set and its matching die from their STAMPtember release. This set is called If the Hat Fits, and like the moment I saw it, I was like, oh my gosh, those hats are so adorable. I love them. And then you add in the sentiments, which is, see what I did there? I didn't even mean to. I'm just stupid. Anyway, some of the sentiments are, you say which like it's a bad thing, resting witch face, if the hat fits, get the matching shoes and broom. So they're just totally adorable, completely my style. My sister loves Halloween, so I intend on sending this card to her. I think that she will totally get a kick out of it. Anyway, so I use my Mini Misty to stamp my hats down. I'm working on Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock, and I am using the matching dies, so I stamped them far enough apart from each other so that I would be able to use those dies without cutting into one or another of them. And I also used intense black ink because we are Copic Coloring, which you can clearly see I am already doing. So I knew I wanted there to be a green background, and usually when you watch my videos, the coloring comes after the background because I usually do my background first, except I did the background and then I didn't like it with the hats, so I ended up making another background, which I totally loved, and I didn't hate the first one, I just didn't like it with the hats, so that's why I'm not showing it to you, because I'll probably use it on another card. Anyway, moving on. So I'm coloring all of these as if they have a center point, a center highlight. That's where my light source is. So you can see here, this is the only hat that's like bent over, and it has little like notches drawn into it. I'm just accentuating those so that we can kind of get like a folded or a crinkled look. And then I'm adding shading on either side of the top portion of the hat. And then the way that the brim is drawn, which I think is beautiful, it just looks very feminine. And so the hat dips down, so there would be a lot of light there since it's centered. And then obviously underneath the hats would also have a lot of shading. Originally I just did a line with the darkest color when I did the underneath of the brim, but I'm going to go back and change that up later. So I work out from lightest out to my darkest color using just the tip of my marker. It's my preferred method of coloring. When it comes to these little folds, I'm only going to add just a little bit of the darkest color. This hat is folded over on itself, so there would be darker shading on that left-hand side. And then I'm just going to add a little bit more shading coming out from underneath the hat. I just really felt like that would be a lot darker. So I'm adding that, and then so once I finished out with my darker color, I'm heading back in toward the lightest color. This time I'm adding much more ink than I did before, bringing that in to fill in the whole image. In this part right here, so I'm shading this side. I wish I would have left a little bit of light between those two lines. I didn't. I ended up connecting them. So I kind of took away one of my quote-unquote crinkles. It still ended up looking fine. Honestly, by the time I built the card, you can't even see that part of this hat. I'm not even making that up. But I wanted to show you in case you did decide to purchase the set, or you have already purchased the set, how I would color it if it was just on its own. So I did leave two little white areas you can see around those crinkles because they would be the highlights, and I'm just going to go over the whole thing once with my lightest color. Really was very happy with the way that came out. Now I'm going to do the ribbon. Like I said, when I started, I was thinking about doing like a neon green background. And so kind of all of the accents on these hats have that green to them. I don't really even know how. I guess I get the neon green for Halloween because like you see it and it's like all spooky and green glow. And then like I guess the purple because it's green's complementary color, but orange is Halloween and blue is its complementary color, and I've never seen anything blue for Halloween. So I don't really know how these became Halloween colors, but I love the neon green and the purple together, so I am just going to roll with it. For this ribbon, it has like where it's folded, that's where that little loop is on the band. It's like folded in on itself, so that part would be darker. There's going to be a highlight around that area where it would be raised, and then darker in the center. The bow portion of it, I colored it, and you can see I kind of left, it's almost a very odd shape, but I left there a highlight in kind of like the right-ish center of it. Because knots are not flat. I've never seen a flat knot in my life. They're not just completely flat, and they're very irregular shaped. So typically your shading is going to be slightly irregular to follow whatever that shape is. For the ribbon that's falling down, there would be a shadow where it's coming out from behind the hat, and then where one is resting on top of another. I added just a little bit of additional shading to the V cut of the ribbon, the bottom of it, because I just felt like that would make it a little bit more interesting. And then for the bow part that's actually tied on the right hand side there, I added the shading to where it's gathered, so where it meets the knot, but then I also added just a little triangle, a teeny tiny little triangle on the outer right hand side to give it that kind of bent in look that bows have. And again, now we're working back out to the lightest color. We're adding in more pigment as we go, because when you're coloring, you watch my channel, you've heard me say this before, your mid-tones should be what you see the majority of. You should see a little bit of the contrast color and a little bit of your highlight, but the majority of the colors that you see should be your mid-tones. Whether you use a 3-color blend, and so you have 1 mid-tone, or a 4-color blend like I typically do, and so I have 2 mid-tones. So once I was happy with all of that, then I decided I was not happy with it, because on the left hand side, I seem to have lost quite a bit of my contrast. And I feel like I'm just like a broken record. Are you guys ever get so sick of hearing me just say the same things? But they're true things, so I have to say them, because otherwise I would be misguiding you. If you're not happy with it, fix it. Go back in, rework it. I wasn't happy with the darkness level on that, so I just went in and added more dark, and then I was happy. That's end of story. Really good time, right? So for this hat, I am starting with a yellow, but I want it to be an orange hat. I just want it to be a very playful kind of fun orange. So I'm starting with a yellow because it's going to give me a lot of brightness. For this one, again, I'm doing the center highlight, and the top of the hat's basically going to be the same as the other one, except it's not crinkled. But the brim is going to be just slightly different, because now I have 2 larger areas where the brim's kind of coming up. So the shading in the center is going to be just a little bit less. There's going to be a lot of light that catches in the middle, so I'm not going to add as much of my contrast color. And because the buckle on this hat comes up fairly high, I'm going to add a little bit more shading behind that element, because I feel like it would cast a larger shadow than just the ribbon on the last one we colored. So you can see as I'm adding the shading to the center of the brim, I'm not coming down as far each time. I still have a lot of white area there. For my contrast color in this particular color combination, I'm actually using an E99. And I know that's maybe a little bit odd, to use a brown to do the shading. You can shade oranges with so many things. I mean, just so many things. You can use yellows in combination with oranges. You can use reds in combination with oranges. You can use browns. But I didn't want this to look red because of the other color combination that I had going on. This green, purple, orange, black. I didn't want red in there. Red is not traditionally tied to Halloween. And I didn't want it to kind of contrast or feel at all Christmassy. I'm very strange about my colors. If it's red and green, it's Christmas in my head. I don't care what it is. I don't care if you color a sailor on a sea and it's red and green. I'm like, why we got a Christmas sailor. I never seen this Christmas sailor before. Seems odd to me that at Christmas this sailor would be sailing. That's just me. Not everybody is like that, and that's totally okay. But for my color preference, I'm just not going to go there. So I opted to do maybe a more golden orange with the brown as the contrast color. I wanted to make sure the hats were all tied in together. So I'm bringing in that violet. I love purple and orange together. It's a very pretty combination. So for the brim, I'm basically doing the same thing that I did before. The belt, because the clasp is laying on top of the belt and the belt is wrapping around, you're going to have shading on the outside of it. You're going to have shading next to the belt. You're going to have shading on the inside of the belt. And then where that little moon is, there's going to be some shading. So this one is just a lot of lines. This is not a lot of real estate. I'm not flicking any color because, quite frankly, I don't have any room to. In order to be able to get those contrast colors in there, not bleed out of the image, because I'm die cutting these, so I have like anxiety about coloring outside the lines because I never knew I was a sloppy colorer until colorer. I don't know what the right terminology is, but a person who colors. That's what I am. I didn't realize I was so sloppy at it until I was doing a die cut where I needed this bright white outline, and then I was like, oh man, I got colors everywhere, not in this image. Uh-oh. So I get very anxious about coloring them. It's pretty torturous for me. In order to tie in that neon green, I colored the little moon green, and then I'm going to do the buckle on this one black. Something to note. I decided to do the coloring, so I added the shading to the top and the bottom of the buckle. I left the highlights on the left and right side. There is not a right or a wrong way to do this. You could also color the left and right side and leave your highlight on the top and bottom. Either of them would be totally fine. Also, if you want it to look super shiny, leave white. Like leading up to the lightest color, leave some white area. I did not do that because, again, small amount of real estate, and I figured I'd just add it in with my white gel pen. I was perfectly comfortable doing that. If you want something that is, that don't have a white gel pen or what have you, then you could just leave that white to begin with and it will look shiny. This one you can see I'm moving much faster. I'm not that good. I'm not like super quick. I actually sped it up because now you've seen this twice. The idea is the same, but I wanted you to see all of the hats colored. This is by far the simplest one of all of the coloring here. The crinkle hat's probably the most advanced. The orange one's middle of the road, and this one is probably the most simple. If I had put any forethought into it, I would have colored them in reverse order, but I didn't, so that's that. I added greens, same greens I've been using, to the brim of the hat. I didn't really feel like you needed to see that. I am showing you the belt again, basically everything the same as the belt on the first one. I just did one thing a little bit different. Where the belt is sitting behind the clasp, and where it's laying on top of the outer edge, I colored those parts darker. I didn't even give them my lightest color because I wanted that part that is sitting on top to stick out. I colored the belt with the orange combination from the previous hat, and it almost looks kind of gold, which was not what I was going for, but nonetheless, that was our situation. I did add some details with some white gel pen because I love details and I can't leave anything alone. So I added some polka dots to the green ribbon. Then for the orange one, I wanted to add some striped lines. Something here to just be aware of is you want to go with the shape of the hat. So the brim is shaped differently. So I curved my lines down. For the top of the hat, I curved my lines up because I wanted everything to follow the shape. Same thing with this black one. I opted to do kind of like a crosshatch, and even though I'm doing diagonal, I'm kind of rounding out the lines to fit the shape of that hat. For the brim, I am going to do the lines, again, with the shape. So some of them are going to be straight out in front of it, but some of them are going to be angled further out toward the edge. I outline all of my images, even if I'm die cutting them, because I just like that bold outline. So I did all of that. I totally outlined them. Then I felt like the white detail needed a little bit of toning. So I went in with my kind of a medium color from each one of them. So I used a YG03 on the one on top. I used a Y38 for the orange. And I just went over the darkest shadow parts of that white line to blend it. That really does kind of bolster the feeling of those shadows. But I have heard people say that this will ruin your Copic markers. I have been doing it since I started. I've never had an issue, but these are your investment. It is your own risk. Now, onto the die cutting. So these are super easy to put in place because the images are so large. And so I put those in place, held them in place with some washi tape, and then I ran it through the Big Shot. Super quick to cut out. I just pulled off the washi tape and popped them right out of their little dies. And then this is at the point where I realized I didn't like the first background, so we're going to make a different one. I'm using regular distressings for this in mustard seed, twisted citron, and mowed lawn because I felt like that would match the green combination that I had on the card already. So distressings blend really well together, but when you put one over another, they do mix. Mustard seed is a super strong color. I did not want it I wanted my green to look green, and I knew that I was running a risk because that twisted citron is so light. So basically I gave myself kind of like a little half moon angle, very light hand with the mustard seed. And then I'm going to bring in the twisted citron. I'm not going to completely cover the yellow. I'm going to kind of like bring it right up to that edge. And in the right hand corner, I'm going to be much more heavy handed with it to really just kind of like bump up the contrast. I'm going to add in some mowed lawn. I love this color. I love the way it came out. I'm an August baby. I was born on the last day of August, and so my birthstone is peridot. My poor mother hates green, like abhors it, and she was like, you couldn't have held out just one more day to be a sapphire. And I'm like, no, because I love it. I love this color. So in that set there are some stars. Distress inks don't exactly stamp like awesome, but for this particular technique, it doesn't matter. I wanted the stars in the background just to add some interest. So I stamped those, and then I'm doing some second generation stamping in my white area. So it really looks like that background fades out. For more interest, if you watched basically anything I've made in the last month, you know I'm pretty much obsessed with like just putting a little white or little clean clear water on my backgrounds, and then also these perfect pearls. Like, honestly, were you surprised to see them? Were you? Because if you were, you've not visited here anytime recently, because I cannot stop using them. Like, we might have to have an intervention. I don't clean my Ranger craft mat, so you can see, well, I mean, not that I never clean it. Oh, for Lord's sake. I mean, I didn't clean it this time. So when I was putting the perfect pearls down and mixing it with the water, it did pick up some of that green. I can tell you that none of that green showed on my card base. None of it. So here I'm kind of setting everything up. I knew I wanted to pop my hats up. So I'm making it a little bit easier on myself. I'm using my Tombow Mono multi-glue to glue the hats to each other to make them one piece, so that way when I go to pop them up, they're already connected and I can just do all of them in one fell swoop. Also, it makes it easier to get my sentiment correct because I have them all together. I laid them out. I put everything in my mini MISTI, and now I can find the perfect spot for my sentiment with my hats laying there because I can't attach them yet. I'm going to pop them up. And sometimes if you pop things up before you stamp your sentiment, it doesn't reach. Like, the sentiment doesn't reach the card base. So I'm stamping this, you say which like it's a bad thing, because I think my sister will get a total kick out of that because I do. We have a similar sense of humor. So I stamp that down, and then before I'm adding it to the card, because I was coloring them as individual hats, I wanted to add just a little bit of shading to the hats where they were sitting on top of the one below it. And then I added a little bit of a shadow to the ground. I just really love the idea of like this totally trendy witch just with like all her hats stacked in the corners so she can, pick one out to match the outfit of the day or whatever she's feeling like. So I think it's super cute. I did feel like the shadow got a little bit too dark and kind of mixed in with that black hat. So I just went over it with the greens I've already been using to lighten it up and kind of shade it a little bit more green. I cut out a whole bunch of little parts from my Scotch foam tape and put those all over the back of these hats and trimmed where necessary. I never waste any of my foam tape. Like, I just find another little spot on the thing I'm putting down to fit those into. Peeling off all those little foamies and then popping it up on my card here. One of the last things I'm going to do, because I can't just have perfect pearls and no other shine, I have an obsession with the shimmers. Clear Wing Castella on just the buckles. And then here is funny, okay? So I put my sequins down, and then I had to walk away. And I thought that they were adhered down. Guess what? They were not. So if you can see on my Nuvo drops, my sequin is actually still attached to the bottle. Turns out, that thing actually makes a really good handle. Like, I'm not even kidding. So, like, I would squeeze my little dot, because that's how I like to do my sequin. Used to do it with glossy accents, now I do it with the Nuvo drops. I squeeze the dot in, I pick up the sequin, I put my glossy accents down, I put the sequin using the bottle. It was brilliant. It totally worked out awesome, thank God, because that was the situation that I was in. I had not adhered them and just didn't realize it. So that's it. That's the whole card. So thank you guys so much for joining me. I hope that you learned a little bit of something, and I will catch you guys on the next video. Bye.